Hello, everybody. Nice to see you here.
Oh gosh.
Even before the introduction, thanks a lot. So, this day is our Educator's Day, you probably all know. And we're starting today with Asmodee. This is Sarah from Asmodee. And she will tell you everything what happens in the next 2 hours right now. Have lots of fun.
Hi everyone. Thank you for coming here and join us on the Educator's Day. I'm Sarah. I work in Asmodee Research and I'm really happy to welcome you. Today the thematic will be promote the benefits of board games in education. And we're here to discuss together about what we can do. So first of all, I will say just a little word about Asmodee Research. So Asmodee Research is the research and development department of Asmodee. Asmodee is a world leader in the publishing and distribution of board games. So we are convinced that beyond being fun to play games, especially board games, can have a positive impact in educational, social, clinical, and other settings. Asmodee Research was created in 2018 to study and promote the benefits of games into the world and what games can provide. So we focus on 3 board games areas to study: academic research, education, and health. By connecting different stakeholders, as we can do together today, we're investing in research and development and helping professionals use games more effectively in their practices in intent to shape a new, more inclusive view of board games. So, the Educator's Day is not new for us. We were already here in 2019 when we presented Gaming Lab. And we were here last year too, in 2022, to present Access Plus, a range of games adapted for people living with cognitive disorders. And we are really happy to be here this year too, to talk about 3 different topics. In Gaming Lab saw the program funding scientific research about board games. And this year we will focus on Metacogit project, led by Anick Pelletier, Céline Lanoé, and Amélie Lubin. Céline is here today for you to explain. Then we will talk about Spark Academy. It's a new initiative led by Asmodee dedicated to supporting professionals bringing board games into education. I will explain that to you later. And the third is HOMO CREATIVUS at the University of Paris-Cité. It's a research lab led by Professor Todd Lubart, right here, and supported by Asmodee, studying the connection between board games and creativity. And Todd and Maxence will present it to you just right after. If it's okay for you, I let the mic to you. Céline?
Donc, je vais peut-être vous... Go there. So this is my colleague, Amélie Lubin, and I am Céline Lanoé. So let me introduce you to the Je Metacogit educational program to enhance executive functioning through a metacognitive approach while playing at school. We are doing this research and we are managing this research with Anick Pelletier, who is a psychoeducator at Quebec. First of all, we ask the following question. Can we improve our executive functioning through a metacognitive approach while playing at school to improve learning? We know that school success is a critical issue for education. Therefore, it's essential today to find ways to enable all students to learn at school. One of the currently considered approaches is self-regulated learning. It involves a set of processes by which the subject activates and maintains his or her behavior, cognition, and emotions to achieve a learning goal. Self-regulated learning may depend on other processes, such as metacognition and executive functions. These functions enable the learner to be active in learning processes. These processes are closely related each others. And we know that there are conceptual links between them, but little empirical evidence. That's what we want to show in this project. So firstly, let's define metacognition. Metacognition corresponds to abilities reflect on one's thought processes in order to regulate cognitive activities. Three components of metacognition are commonly identified. First of all, metacognitive knowledge. It's about what I know about my activity, knowledge about my own activity. Metacognitive experiences is how I feel about my activity, emotional experiences, affective experiences. And lastly, metacognitive skills is how I control my activity during the activity, how I manage it. And now, what about executive function? Executive function was originally defined by Luria as a set of high-level cognitive skills to perform goal-directed behavior. Other authors, as Zelazo, take a broader view of executive functions. They define executive functions as a set of top-down neurocognitive processes that underlie the regulation of thought, emotion, and action. They identified cold and hot executive functions. Cold executive functions, such as cognitive side, as planning, monitoring, inhibition, switching, working memory, and hot executive functions such as affective side, like emotional regulation, decision-making, and social cognition. Various studies have shown the links between metacognition, executive functions, and academic learning. So, we can ask the following question: how to help students better manage their academic learning? Firstly, we can train executive function by repeating executive tasks, as many authors have tried to do it. But the effects are often limited and not very transferable to academic learnings. Secondly, we can use a metacognitive approach by raising awareness of executive processes. Thirdly, we can play board games to train executive functions. Board games encourage competition or cooperation among players to achieve a specific goal. Executive functions are heavily engaged in these activities, and numerous studies have shown the benefits of using board games to enhance cognitive functioning. But firstly, only few studies was done on executive function. And secondly, few studies used board games. So, A new fun way is to train executive function by using a metacognitive approach and playing board games in the classroom. That's why we created the Je Métacogite program. So, Je Métacogite program is a meeting between a Franco-Canadian Franco-Canadian meeting between researchers in psychology, in educational science, and psycho-educators. It is a metacognitive educational program for elementary school students. It aims to raise students' awareness of their brain and executive functions by using board games. We have developed metacognitive teaching sessions about brain and executive functions, and daily classroom game sessions to train on the brain. The Je Métacogite program lasts 25 weeks and is composed of 10 metacognitive sessions following a chronological line. Each session develops brain notion, cognitive and executive functions, such as teaching the brain, inhibition on shifting, directed attention, activation, internal speech, mental imagery, working memory, anticipation, planning and self-regulation, and long-term memory. Each session uses a specific board game to train one of the cognitive and executive functions I mentioned. Ah, on n'a pas tout vu. Sorry. Alors, let's have a look together at an illustration of a session about impulsivity regulation. First of all, the notion of impulsivity is explained to children to make them aware of it. J'arrive pas à voir la vidéo. Ah. Sorry, I didn't find the... I have some difficulties to find the sound button in this computer.
Céline?
Ah, voilà, je ne l'ai pas, moi, ici. I don't have it. Yeah, it's easier. Thanks.
Slow down. Stop. That little speed band you see there, you can use it at any moment in your life. In fact, I'm showing you this image so that you can visualize that you shouldn't think as fast as a Formula One racing car. You should rather set your neurons at 90 kilometers per hour and take the time to analyze things slowly to have a 100% chance of doing them right. That will give you a much better thought out work. I know it's hard to press the stop button sometimes. Sometimes our brain might become impulsive and want to think fast and do things quickly. That will only lead you to make mistakes. That will only result in work that is half done or work that contains errors. I don't think that is really what you want, is it? So, learn how to drive slower. Learn how to use your brakes, okay? You know those images you see on the board right now, on the screen. You can ask your teacher to print them off for you. You could keep them on your desktop or use them as a reminder during an exam. You could take a quick glance at the little car with 90 written on it at the stop sign, and at the speed bumps too. Some pupils use those images because it helps them slow down. It reminds them they shouldn't go too fast.
So next, children discover and play 3 board games that train impulsivity.
Well, so you should know that there are games you can play to help you keep up with the 90 speed limit. Yes, indeed, you heard it right. Board games. Do you see the Slackjack game on the screen? Well, that's a game specifically invented to train to stick to the 90 speed limit. There's also the Fast Flip game. It's a small game where you have to be very, very, very fast. But be careful not to be too fast because you won't give the correct answer and you'll lose cards. Switches is a bit like that too. You have to be very quick, but if you speak too fast and don't give the correct answer, you'll be penalized. In the end, there are plenty of games to work on impulsivity. In these games, you'll be asking your neurons to activate very quickly in order to win the game. But if you go into Formula 1 mode, you'll make mistakes. These games are perfect for training your neurons to switch on quickly while thinking in 90 kilometers per hour mode to find the correct answer. I really hope you find the correct answer and get some practice with these games.
Okay, next.
Well, so
HOMO
Celine
hypothesis.
has just given you an overview of the details of the program. Now let's delve into the processes that this program is designed to impact. With the Jeux Métacognitifs program, students will learn metacognitive knowledge about the brain and executive function, which they will then apply in metacognitive experiences during their board games practice. And we believe that consequently students will be able to use metacognitive skills to better manage their executive function and ultimately their academic learning. To our knowledge, no study has tested the effectiveness of such an educational program on a large scale within a school context. This is precisely the aim of our study. Our aim is to assess the impact of the Jeux Métacognitifs program on metacognition, executive function, and academic success of students aged 9 to 10 years. For what, we formed 4 groups of students. One group who participated in the Jeux Métacognitifs program, while the other 3 groups served as active control groups, each following a different program. The game group engaged in daily board game session but didn't have metacognitive session. The meta group, on the other hand, followed metacognitive session but didn't engage in daily board practice. And finally, the control group followed the conventional program. Our hypothesis is that the students in the Jeux Métacognitifs group will show greater improvement in metacognition, executive function, and academic learning
After completing the program in comparison to students in the other groups. Sorry.
However, we expected to observe differences between the game group and the meta group in terms of metacognition and executive function. We hypothesized that the both group would outperform the control group, but we speculated that the game group might perform better than the meta group in terms of executive function, while conversely the meta group might show stronger performances in terms of metacognition. So, let me talk to you about the methodology we employ in this study. We started by recruiting 302 fourth grade participants from 16 classrooms across 8 public schools in Quebec, in Canada. The study extended over the course of an entire school year and was divided into 3 distinct sessions. During the initial pre-test session, we assessed metacognitive, executive, and academic performances using a battery of tests. Additionally, as control variable, we also collected variables such as socio-economic status and intellectual efficiency. Afterwards, students followed the 25-week programs. They were divided into the 4 groups, the experimental jeu métagogique group and the 3 control groups, the game group, the meta group, and the control group. Lastly, during the post-test session, we assessed participants with the same battery of tests to assess their progress after the program. Now, let me explain the differences between the weekly programs of the 4 groups. We can see in this table the 4 groups and the weekly program. Every Monday, students in the Metagogique program begin their week with a metacognitive session delivered via a video clip. Following this, they watch another video clip explaining the rules of the game they will play, and the rest of the week was devoted to daily 20-minute sessions involving specific board games that focused on the executive function discussed in the metacognitive video clip. In contrast, the game group didn't benefit from metacognitive session. Instead, on Monday, they watched a video clip related to topic about the human body. Afterward, they received an explanation of the game rules and played the same games daily. The meta group closely mirrors the jeu métagogique group's program with one exception. They didn't incorporate board games into their routine. Instead, they watched a video clip on how it's made and spent their time engaging in daily 20 minutes free reading session. Finally, the control group didn't receive metacognitive session or play board games. Their Monday involved watching video clips on the topic of the human body and how it's done, and the rest of the week they participated in a daily 20 minutes free reading session. Okay, as a quick reminder, we initially hypothesized that students in the jeu métagogique group would show improvement in metacognition, executive function, and academic performances after completing the program in comparison to students in the other groups. We had several tests for metacognition, executive function, and academic learning. So, in our data analysis, we started by calculating progression scores for each test. This involved subtracting the pre-test scores from the post-test scores. Next, we computed a composite progression score by averaging the scores across all the tests. In total, we had 3 progression scores, one for metacognition, one for executive function, and one for academic learning. Finally, we conducted statistical analysis to compare the 4 groups based on the progression score of metacognition, executive function, and academic learning, while controlling by intellectual efficiency and socioeconomic status. I will now present the result. Unfortunately, contrary to our expectation, there was no significant group effect observed on the composite progression scores in academic learning and metacognition. However, we did find a significant group effect on the composite executive function progression score. Here, we can see a graph illustrating the composite executive function progression score for the 4 groups. The jeu pédagogique group is in green, the game group in gray, the meta group in blue, and the control group in yellow. If children progress, their score is positive. But if they regress, their score is negative. Okay? As we can see, students in the jeu pédagogique group achieve notably better executive progression score after completing the program compared to the other groups. Moreover, there are significant differences between students in the game group and those in the meta group compared to the control group. However, it becomes clear that in the end, both the game and meta groups show minimal progress, while it seems that the control group is actually regressing. So, contrary to expectations, students in the game group didn't improve their executive function performances more than those in the meta group. If we delve now deeper into the progression scores of the 5 tests that constitute the executive function composite score, we can see that the progression score of jeu pédagogique is better than the other groups for the majority of the tests, such as planning, Educator'S behavioral regulation index, and executive function self-assessment questionnaires.
So finally, about discussion on perspectives of this project. This project demonstrates that the benefits of a jeu pédagogique program on executive function of 9 and 10 years old students. The jeu pédagogique program seems to improve executive function contrary to the other groups. Exercising executive function through board games without a metacognitive approach is not sufficient to improve executive function. Playing for playing's sake doesn't seem to be enough to improve executive function. So the jeu pédagogique educational program is a fun way to enhance executive function through a metacognitive approach while playing at school. So I would like to thank all the partners and collaborators in this project. Anick Pelletier, first of all, who is a psychoeducator in Quebec, and all my colleagues of my laboratory of psychology at the University of Caen, Normandy, France, and all the students and teachers of our partner schools, and lastly, all the students, master students of the University of Caen, Normandy, who were working in this project. And thank you to everybody here, and enjoy Spiel Hessen.
Hi, it's me again. I guess you have some question for Céline, but if you can keep all the questions for the end of the conferences, and we will have time to discuss together at the end, if it's okay for you. Okay, I'm here to represent Asmodee Research to talk to you about the Spark Academy Game and Learn program. It's a new initiative from Asmodee because we believe board games could be useful tools for education. I think if you're here, it's because you are convinced too. So let's discuss about it together. So when we reflect on education, authors typically gravitate towards conventional classrooms, textbooks, structured lessons, etc. But we think we can do things differently or incomplete and better. I'd like to talk with you about a different facet of learning, one that's often overshadowed, unfortunately, by its reputation as mere entertainment. Of course, board game, you guess it. From the earliest civilization, games have woven themselves into the fabric of history, culture, and traditions. They serve as medium to celebrate, educate, challenge, and bond. In more recent society, games were just pastimes. They were pivotal tools for imparting essential life skills and wisdom. But in our contemporary area, we distance play from structured learning. We have some defiance, we have some, we don't really know what they can give to children. Board games are often seen as diversion and not as the potent educational instruments they are. So, game and education are linked in the Renaissance, and Montaigne captured this sentiment eloquently. He said it should be noted that the children at play are not playing about. Their games should be seen as their most serious-minded activity. And that's very important for us, because when the children play, they really are into this. It's really serious for them. And when we grow up, we lost this feeling. So it's not only entertainment, it's really something serious for them. Since ancient Greece, games were instrumental in teaching strategy and logic. Into Middle Ages, where they became vessels for improving intrinsic value. And if you take chess, for example, it's been a long-standing tool for strategy and critical thinking. It was really something in the past where the games were very important tools, and we lost it today. By the 17th century, games weren't just pastimes, they were philosophically endorsed. Valued educational thinkers like Comenius and Locke began to view childhood through a more optimistic lens, emphasizing the educational skills of games. Locke promoted the idea of equipping children with educational toys. We have other... I find my thing, that's better for me. In France, we have Politica Gorman, a trailblazer of Jules Ferry kindergarten and a prominent kindergarten inspector. She ardently believed in the integrated play, particularly in kindergarten, at the bedrock of holistic learning. She said, play is the child's work, their calling, their very existence. A child at play in kindergarten is being acclimated to academic life. So can we truly assert they learn nothing in such playful endeavors? Of course, we think no. We also find this feeling in Ferdinand Nathan since 1905. We particularly know him for the educational literature, but he was also a pioneer in education games. He worked with Ovid de Crowley, was a Belgian educator, and together they offer a new educational movement with games. Nathan published very important educational games in the history. De Crowley's vision was to support children's independence and learning via games and pedagogical tools. And Nathan published something become very classic for kindergarten, like lotteries, like domino, like puzzles, like construction sets. But the classics are often limited in the young child, for the very young people, and nothing was kept after. So now we can see some changes, and that's really important, and I think it's why you're so many at these conferences. The board games joined the educational official programs, and there is many studies, many researches, and we are very proud at Asmodee to be part of it, to our brilliant partners. And we can see in Canada, in Sweden, in China, in New Zealand, but in also other countries, this topic, board games in education, go really further. Maybe a thing could be important too. It's today, in the digital age, the traditional board game attraction are still here, and we saw it very in a very important way during the COVID period, and we can see today children and adults too are still convinced by board games. They wanted to play to it. So we ask ourselves, what can we do to promote this use of board games in education? I prepared this slide, but I think after what we heard, it's not really important. It's just to say we launched the Access Plus round last year, and we work on the cognitive functions solicited by the games with Anick Pelletier, so in the Metacogit. And we found the solicitation of this cognitive function in each gate double, for example, is really important for emotion management and short-term memory. And in these games, they are not, in all board games, not created for learning. We can find cognitive functions solicited, and we can find soft skills who are developed by board games. So that's why we think it could be a very good tool in education. I just want to make a quick parenthesis on the study of on the impacts of game conducted by the research team from the Canadian Apprentissage Network on Games and Simulation. It's a systematic literature review was undertaken. The review aimed to identify in article and research reports since 1998. Wow, gosh, sorry. The impact of the games on learning, considering the essential attributes of the games. The synthesis of the analysis showed that the game influenced various aspects of human learning at all ages, from kindergarten to university. So, board games foster the development, cooperation, communication, and human relationship skills, even on a competitive game, but more, of course, in cooperative games. Board games enhance motivation for learning in various ways. Board games promote problem-solving abilities. Board games aid in structuring knowledge and encourage the reinforcement of subject-specific knowledge. Board games facilitate the integration of information by developing the ability to establish links and transpose acquired knowledge into other contexts. I read it because I take it on the study, so I just want to be perfectly transparent with you. Moreover, research confirmed that the game-based learnings allows for interaction and socialization, whether for collaboration or competition. That's Lennart from 2008. And provides sensory, image, music, action, etc., or emotional simulation, presence of narrative, interesting characters, etc., that Tisserand in 2013. So the best games capture players' attention for extending period, providing a significant sense of accomplishments and well-being. Quote from Alexandre Lillo and Thomas Borrelli in their research. This phenomenon, known as flow effect, according to Minelli, induce a state of maximum concentration, highly conducive to learning. If you were here last year, our colleague Leah talked about the flow effect during his conferences. You can find it online. It's really interesting, and not because she's a really great girl, she's also a really great researcher. So she worked on the Dixit and the cognitive function and the flow effect, and it's really interesting. There is another point to consider. Group games are an excellent way to help students develop their individual skills. It's the American Institute of Research conclude that the collective learning meets individual learning needs as players struggling are supporting on their peers' progress to the game. So, all these benefits, all these good conclusions seems to be very important to us to be developed. That's why we create the Spark Academy program. Our goal is to really provide useful tools for educators. So of course we make a game selection to align board games with the educational objective, but it's not enough. We can just go and provide board games. We saw it's not enough, and we saw the teachers especially the ones not really be convinced by board games, don't use board games in school. But teachers, maybe some of you are, who love board games, use it at school and discover the very positive effect of them. So that's why we want to share this knowledge and share this conclusion to everyone and help educators to bring board games into the daily routine of the child, from kindergarten to the university and all over the world, because Asmodee is an international company. Of course, we will provide training and assets to equip educators with board game knowledge and integration technique. It's not only provide the games, it's to explain what to do with these games and why. That's really important too. We would like to integration into the curriculum, the official programs, and complement traditional teaching with board games-based learning. And of course, share the feedback and spotlight, because we know educators as a very common community. So, to be more detailed in our action, the most important thing for us is to play for play. Our goal is not to create serious games or educational or training games. We know that each games can provide something. Of course, we can make a selection to keep the best of them and train the cognitive function, as Céline said just before. And we want to bring to the educator the best of the board games to share with the children. Here it is. And now I will give the mic to Todd and Maxence to present the next program.
Okay, come on up.
C'est la flèche là.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Todd Lubart, and this is Maxence Mercier. We're at the University Paris-Cité in France, and we're going to talk to you today about HOMO CREATIVUS, which is the name for the creative side of humankind. So, welcome all of you HOMO CREATIVUS people. Okay. We have a research chair on HOMO CREATIVUS with 5 topics at the university in our lab where we study this since many years. And one of our topics is games and creativity, which we're going to talk about today. The other topics are creative potential in the professional world, how to develop it, creativity and virtual reality, culinary creativity, and AI and creativity. Okay. So first of all, perhaps you're familiar with the term 21st century skills, and there are 4 that are often cited: creative thinking, critical thinking, collaboration, and communication, sometimes called the 4 C's. And so creativity has been highlighted recently in the educational domain. In studies and surveys by OECD, there was a program deployed in 10 countries recently to see if teachers can boost children's creativity through activities that they decide to implement. PISA included creative thinking as a special module recently. IBM did a survey of CEOs around the world who cited creativity as one of the top things important for their close collaborators. And the World Economic Forum has listed creativity in the top 10 and now in the top 3 skills that are important for employability in the next years. So what is creativity? Well, this is our brief definition in which we consider creativity as an ability to produce work, ideas of all kinds, and this work is both original, novel, and relevant in its context. Because you produce some idea that's very original but not relevant, it's what we call bizarre. Okay, so and we don't encourage that. Okay, so so this is an important ability. It's something that's malleable. that can be developed, it can be improved. Now you see here different examples of creative domains of activity: scientific, mathematical, literary, culinary, commercial, publicity, artistic, doing things in terms of inventing things. And these examples are all well-known cases of what you might call professional creativity, creativity by famous people, for example. But creativity actually has an important role to play in everyday life, not only in job situations. And also, creativity is considered an intrapsychic way of thinking that every one of us uses when we learn and construct new knowledge for our own selves in our own lives. You have to create the new knowledge as a learner. So creativity has a vast domain of importance in education itself as a key process to learning itself. You construct your new ideas and your new knowledge. So, how can we improve creativity? 3 main ways. First of all, there exists some specific programs for schools or for adults in which you do exercises to train your creativity. It's a pull-out module you can implement in a school setting or an adult learning setting. Often these train divergent thinking, the ability to have many different ideas. Second, there's alternative pedagogies in which the whole school structure is organized. So for example, I am sure you're familiar with Montessori, Freinet, who is our French sort of Montessori guy, and Orff Schulwerk from the German perspective, for example. And the third way is through extracurricular activities. So by doing some of these activities, for example, taking painting lessons outside schools, arts and crafts activities, museum visits, drama, theater, play activities, all these extracurricular things could stimulate creative thinking in children or adolescents or even adults. But there's one avenue we don't often talk about. Guess what it is? Games. And so we're going to talk now about games and how they can impact creativity. And we're going to show you some results we've obtained. Maxence here is going to take over and tell us all about it. And he's been working hard. We're funded by Asmodee as part of the HOMO CREATIVUS Research Chair for 3 years. And he's working on his PhD. He's almost done. And we're going to reveal to you first time results revealed in the world today. Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Maxence.
Okay, so can you hear me well? Yeah. Okay, great. So as I've been shown in the 2 previous presentation, games are effective at teaching and improving the whole variety of skills, of knowledge, and it's been linked to academic achievement, so better performance. There's effects on critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, and all the different things you've seen in the last slides. And one key avenue, which is pretty easily applicable in the classroom, would be board games, so board game-based learning, and has been actually pretty conclusive or pretty solid evidence for things like mathematics, for teaching even abstract scientific concepts. So there's people called Chiarello and Castellano who used it to teach general relativity and quantum mechanics, so pretty powerful stuff. Communication skills and emotional competencies. So I'm going to show you a bit of studies that have been conducted a while back. So Lydia Jackson and our collaborators found that people or children who play video games give more ideas. So you'll be seeing divergent thinking a lot on the slides. Divergent thinking is the ability to generate a lot of ideas. So for example, you have a starting point. For example, create ideas based on a brick, find multiple uses for this brick, and then come up with as much as you can. So children aged 12 in this study, the more they played video games, the more creative and the more divergent they were. We have also Blanco Herrera, who found that people who played more video games, in this case it was students, so around 18, 19, had more imagination, which they call trait creativity. There's a few studies on table role-playing games. For example, Chung, he found that people who play role-playing games are more creative than people who don't. So pretty self-explanatory if you know anything about role-playing games. This is a kind of game where you need imagination, when you need storytelling. So, in our case, first, what makes a board game conducive to and effective at improving creativity? We came up with a sort of pragmatic definition. So, based on the definition we saw defined by Todd, creativity is two things. First, originality, and adaptiveness or relevancy. And games that require this kind of generative or creative generation skills and sets of knowledge. I'm beginning. So games that require creativity basically to perform well or even to win should be games that are conducive to creativity, because you need to actively engage in creativity. And some possible aspects that are targeted, so it's divergent thinking, so generating a lot of ideas. Convergent thinking, so finding the best idea or the most creative idea. And for example, flexibility, the ability to take multiple perspectives on a given problem. For the games we used several games that are commonly known, or I hope that you all know Dixit. I think so. So these games, so for example, Dixit is a game that actively requires divergent thinking. You need to come up with a lot of ideas, and you need to find the best idea out of them all to convey what you want. And it needs to be not obvious, and it needs to capture something that will be understood by some of the other players. Imagine is a game where you need to to guess concepts based on a very limited set of analogical spots, so basically only transparent cards. And again, you need ideas that are new, because, for example, if you need to find word for Gotham City or things that are very specific, you need to come up with the most original idea, and it needs to be relevant so that others find it. And the big idea is a game where you invent inventions based on a set of cards that are limited and that are pretty random. So in this first study, which was published at the beginning of the year, we used two games, which were here, Imagine and The Big Idea. What we did was we put students, so here around 19 years old, and we put them in three different conditions. So either they played creative board games. In the other condition, we have non-creative board games like Twin It, which is a game of pure reflex. Think Jungle Speed, this kind of thing. There's no creativity involved in finding a pattern. And a control condition where students played no games at all. Then we have a creativity task. So there's a common task which is called alternative uses task by Wallach, Kogan, and some other famous people like Guilford for us, at least. And in it, they need to come up with ideas. For example, here's a belt, find solutions or find uses for this belt, and be as original, as creative as you can. We measure two things: fluency, basically the quantity of ideas, and originality, how new they were, how uncommon they were, and how surprising they were. We had 239 participants, which were, again, so college students around 18 to 19. The main result is here, so let me break it down for you. Here's the results for originality, which was the main result. People in the creative conditions, so in the middle, were a lot more original, or gave a lot more original ideas than the counterparts, either in control groups, so basically when you play creative games, you're more original than if you don't play creative games. But the most interesting thing is that they were also better than the non-creative games. Basically, what this means is that just playing games is not enough. You need to play a game that is really conducive and really tailored to creativity. So for the creative potential, you don't need to know everything about the study, but if you really desire so, what this means is that people who are either low creatives, medium creative, or really high in creativity, all of them benefited. So regardless of your starting point, you'll be seeing improvement of your originality. For the quantity of ideas, there were no real results for this, so inconclusive. But at least for originality, which is part of the definition of creativity, there were solid results on this. So now, for the teaser on the study that's coming up, with Todd Libert and my co-supervisor, which is called Samira Bourgeois-Bougrine, we conducted a study on games. And what we targeted there was collective creativity. When you play board games, you usually play in groups. In French, we call them jeux de société, so social games of games of society. And what we guessed was that people playing in groups should help them come up with more ideas as a collective. So two conditions: creative board games versus non-creative board games. For the creative board games, we had two. So we used the big idea again. And this time we used Dixit, which was sort of like the most obvious games, but no studies have tested it. So we were like, let's do it, because nobody does it for some reason. And the big idea again, which was pretty successful, so we tried to expand upon this result for collective creativity. So about like the protocol, we had people come at the lab, so again, students around 18 to 19. So they came up at the lab and they played to either a creative game or a non-creative game in groups of 3, so always 3 people to control for the number of ideas. If you're more in a group, you will have more ideas, obviously. So they played the games, then they had to do something called a brainstorming task. I think you know what brainstorming is. For those who do not know the real brainstorming definition, you need to find as much ideas as you can. You need to be non-critical towards yourself, so you need to give any ideas you came up with, and you have to be non-critical toward the other, so you need to accept all ideas. You are allowed to disagree, but you need to accept the ideas, regardless. We measured 3 things: fluency, again, quantity of ideas; originality, how novel, how unique, how surprising they were; and elaboration, which is the depth of the idea, the amount of detail in the idea. For example, you can, I don't know, for example, let's say for a brick, just like a sort of abstract example, you could say that, well, I can make a bridge out of bricks, which is not a very original or elaborated idea, or you can just like describe the whole architecture of the bridge. It isn't really original, but it's more elaborated. So if you like basically make a plan of the entire building process. It would be a bit more elaborated than just saying, well, let's build a bridge. So here's the main results. So 3 simple graphs. What they say, basically, for all things we measured, people who were in the creative condition, well, they were more creative than people in the non-creative. Okay. Compared to the previous study, where there were only originality that was improved, here everything gets improved, which means that board games are probably specifically tailored for collective creativity. Not necessarily because you make links or construct or build something like a connection between the people, because if it were the case, the non-creative board games would also improve creativity, but really because the whole set of giving ideas, listening to ideas, make the brainstorming process much more effective in terms of number of ideas, in terms of originality, and in terms of the detail of the ideas. So, just to okay.
Oh, but I'd just like to say one thing. That result that you just saw here, first, it's the first time to our knowledge that there's a scientific study that shows that playing board games in a group actually improves the group's creativity after playtime. In the first study that you saw from published, we tested, people played together, but then we tested their individual creative thinking, okay? So this is breaking news, as you would say, okay? Because we have shown a triple effect on collective creativity of the brainstorming, which is number of ideas, originality of ideas, and development of ideas. That's why it was a good idea to come today to see it live. Okay, so now we're going to finish up. Okay.
So let's skip over to this.
Yeah.
How much time do we have left?
Mine 0.
Okay, 0. Okay, great.
Okay.
So just a quick thing that we're working on with Todd and a lot of other collaborators is this grid. So what we look for in a game to be considered creative board games was in the previous studies really simple. So we looked at the definition of creativity and we tried to apply it to games that really necessitate and require creativity to perform well. Thing is, games are a bit more complicated and creativity is a bit more complicated too. So what we're trying to do is to find games that target specific components of creativity and of the forces as a whole. So you have creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. The idea being to find really games that target specific aspects. For example, only originality, only divergent thinking, or games that target multiple aspects. For example, both divergent thinking and convergent thinking. Okay.
So just to say a word on this, we're working on criteria that we can look at a game, look for the specific things listed here under each of the 4 C's, and determine if the game has the necessary elements to hopefully promote creativity or critical thinking or collaboration or communication or several. And based on that, to be able to label a game as good for 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these 4 21st century skills. So that this is a thing we're working on. We have a paper about it with Thornhill Miller and collaborators, including us.
Which is in open access. If somebody is interested, you can find it for free, this one.
Okay.
So to conclude, do you want to?
Well, to conclude, so first of all, board games, we've shown that they're a good avenue to improve and develop creativity. Second of all, we've got results in hand for individuals who have played and for the group who has played. They played for about 30 minutes, short-term play session. And they show a boost in creativity compared to control groups that play a not so creative game, for example, or that sit around doing nothing, for example, which is even less fun. And games can be chosen or developed based on what we found to enhance creative capacity. That's it.
Yeah,
we are available here.
Yeah, if you need.
You're welcome to send us a message 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we'll get back to you sometime. Okay, and we have references.
If you want, yeah.
Yes, and so we invite you to find these PDFs on Google Scholar, read them, be in touch, or whatever. Okay. Now we'll come up.
Si je t'en prie. Oui, oui, il accroche. Je peux y aller. So,
You wanna
it's
come?
question time.
Yes.
I have this.
Pardon.
Thank you very much for your attention. If you have question for all of us, please. The first one is always the worst, but after it's better. So.
Oh, wait.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for your presentation. I would like to know, I have been using games in my classroom, but I work with adults, and adults have this shame of being children again. So I would like to hear, especially with this study with college students, how you manage a group of adults that they don't feel silly playing a game when it's very beneficial for them. Thank you.
Well, first of all, you should know that in our studies, we have what's called the basic human, which is a psychology student who has to come upstairs and earn points. So when they come up and they learn that they're going to play a game in this study, they're very happy, usually. But more generally, in the workplace or with adults who have no specific motivation to play games, if you say that, in fact, games have been shown to have a positive impact, and so this often removes any philosophical issue they may have, that playing games is somewhat of a childlike thing. And as Picasso had said, he spent his whole life as an artist to learn to paint like a child. So there's a lot to gain from things that we did naturally as children, in fact. And so it's a discourse that is perhaps necessary to make the activity fit with people's career objectives or something like that. Maybe our other speakers here want to say a word. In addition, Maxence has been trained as a workplace psychologist, so he knows how to handle people's psychology.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things to say about this. One thing that might be of interest to some of you, if you're interested in play and adults. So in the Netherlands and in Germany, there are a few researchers that have came up with a concept called playful work design, which is a way to make people enjoy more their usual task. So you don't really change the task in itself, but the view you have of it. So this is something that works really well because adults, like children, like to play. It's not because it can be seen as frivolous, but usually people like to play. I think coming to telling people that are convinced by this, I hope so. And so one thing that I want to do after my PhD is specifically to work on adults because, as Dutch said, college students are the average human, of course, but we need to expand a bit upon this. And so, yeah, I need to we need to find ways to develop creativity through games. And one thing that we see is that they are usually seen as icebreakers, so a way to make people uninhibited, which usually helps creativity. But you could, for example, imagine that playing a game just before like a brainstorming task, like we did, could be seen as useful and pretty cheap. So play 30 minutes of a game, which costs less than like long and convoluted basically formations and creativity, which are helpful, but take a lot more time and a lot more resources. So maybe this could be an avenue, and well, this is an avenue that we need to explore.
Hello, thank you. I have a question for Ms. Celine. In your research, you mentioned that students had their lessons, let's say, best group, right? They were exposed to both games and metacognition lessons.
Yes.
And I'm interested because I saw that something was done on Monday and something was done for the rest of the week.
Yeah.
Now I'm interested how this was structured, because I am a subject teacher and I'm always pressed for time. And I saw those 20 minutes and I was wondering, how could I do my lesson and the 20 minutes of playtime? So you also mentioned these were students 9 and 10 years old, but I could see the benefits that could be used in older students, right? But again, the time.
Yeah.
So.
Sorry, but I have some troubles with my microphone. So the time is really difficult to manage in schools with children. So the teacher, our partners, teachers, have to make choices to implement, to integrate this game session in our curriculum in the classrooms. So you have to manage a priority, and they have to discuss it with their inspectors and to explain why it was so important and crucial for children.
Hi, I have a question on your work on collective creativity, and you've shown this effect between the creative and non-creative group in terms of originality and elaboration, and I'm wondering, how is this measured? Are these some kinds of psychological questionnaires with a score, or what's the background of this?
Yeah, okay, so I skipped a bit on the protocol there. So what we did, so a brainstorming task, you ask people to come up with ideas, given you give them a problem. Here we had college students. What we asked them was, you have to find ways to improve your teaching at your university, find ways to improve learning, and they had 15 minutes to do so. So they were together, they gave ideas. It could be really pragmatic ideas, for example, more interactions in, for example, what we call cours magistraux.
In the big lectures,
yeah, okay.
Or activity sessions, learning.
Yeah. Basically more interaction, or they could be a bit more fanciful. For example, give them like creative workrooms, or fill the rooms with more colors, more comfort. So they gave these ideas, and usually when you want to rate creativity, you need expert of the given topic. For example, if you want to evaluate the creativity of a poem, you take a poet, which usually knows his job or his art. Here we had basically students giving ideas and creative ideas about lessons, about college lessons. So the experts were first teachers, and teachers that knew creativity. For example, this guy right here, which knows a bit about both of this topic. And because the ideas were really concrete, usually when you evaluate creativity, the ideas can be a bit abstract. For example, find ideas that you can make with a cardboard. Usually it's not really concrete because there's no use, or at least it's not really useful to know what to do with a cardboard or with a brick. But finding ways to improve your learning situation at the college here, but this can be expanded upon, for example, in the classroom, in the, let's say, gymnasium, in the high school, sorry, I forgot the term. Yeah, you can really get a grasp of what students think, usually what students need to do, which can be pretty interesting when you're a teacher, to find what your students need through this kind of creativity task. So,
Yeah, just to complete that, so these students, they do this task, they generate ideas about how to improve teaching at the university. They're judged by teachers from our university, and all the ideas from the different groups that had creative games or not so creative games are all mixed up together. So the judges don't know who produced what idea, and the number of ideas is just a number by each group, and the elaboration, I think, is the number of words that are in these ideas. So it's the detail of the ideas.
I think I'm up next. Up front, I would like to, over here, I would like to thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. And I would like to ask two questions, one for both of your groups. I would like to follow up the question on creativity. You have shown us a slide in your presentation of systematic method for detecting creative board games. It's about Thornhill, Miller et al. And I think I just skipped one little part. You have shown us the table of all the criteria for creative board games. And it would be lovely if we would have a cross-reference chart if I would like to boost, well, objective thinking, which game would I have to pull out of my shelf. But this is work to be done. It's not finished. Okay, that's my first answer. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I missed this part. And the second question would be regarding jeu métagogite. I'm sorry if I pronounced this wrongly.
Okay.
It's regarding the question before as well. You told us that the most important part would be that the playing is accompanied with the clip regarding metacognitive activity and thinking. But it is a kind of a black box. So it's a very mysterious clip. It's only 10 minutes and it makes all the difference. So I was thinking first, could you share which clip this is? And second, in my line of work, I'm a chemistry teacher also. I have collected the impression that students like to play games, they like to make experiments, they like to tinker around. That's what playing is all about. And they like the experience, but to bridge to the theoretical aspects is the most difficult part. And I think that's where chemistry experiments and playing simulative board games is pretty much alike. So is the clip about this bridging, this metacognitive activity, thinking about what I'm doing here, or what is the content of this mysterious and wonderful clip?
Yes, the clips were about the metacognitive. It was a metacognitive approach about some executive functions. So, what about working memory? Do you know working memory? How could you represent it, and how could you train it? regularly. So the first of all, the students were raised about these executive functions. It was a clip, but after all, the teachers investigate with the students in the classrooms these notions actually in the lessons of mathematicals or in the lessons of literacy, and how the children have to use some pictograms or some in daily in the classrooms. I don't know if I have answered to your question. More or less.
I'm next. Hi. Thank you again for sharing. My question is basically for all the scholars in general, but also I think to Metacogit and the experiments that you ran in general. I was wondering, whereas you have your experiment targeted towards developing metacognition and executive functions in order to measure then academic success or academic grasping or content, academic learning, do you see any value in exploring also games that target this academic content directly, games that serve as some sort of metaphor for the actual content that they're learning, to see if that would have an effect if going to a lecture versus playing a game about chemistry, for example, or organic chemistry, would have some sort of impact and be better. For example, there's a game called Wingspan that teaches a great deal about ornithology, if only that were a relevant academic content. But those sorts of games targeted towards reading and writing, towards mathematics and these sorts of things, and if you know of any studies or references about this.
There are only few studies that which are doing publication about executive functions and board games. So it's a lot of studies talk about pedagogical games, but not about modern board games which are raising executive functions. So we don't have so much publication in the literature today. So that's why we want to find something about it.
Hi, I'm from India, and I train founders on building a mindset, a growth mindset. So I built a simulated game where you can play as the founder of a company and run your own company. This works very well as a workshop when it comes to companies because they want it as a leadership program. But when I go to educational institutes, there is an inhibition to play the game because they have this feeling that this is a game. Even though when founders and companies played it, they were convinced that it improved their executive functioning. They understood where people fit better, and their decision making in uncertainty improved. Because I come from behavioral economics, I study that, and I try to put all of that into a game. Now my question is, how can we do research with more games like this and build proof or evidence for educational institutes to be convinced that this is how we learn as human beings? Because a game has all the components of learning. We struggle. There is peer-to-peer learning. There is emotions involved, which help us in retaining all that memory. But somehow the people who are in charge of learning are the ones who reject this idea. So is there a way we could increase the amount of research on games like this? Maybe we could send you data from our games and you could help doing this research, because I feel like this is where learning has to move towards. We cannot be stuck in an outdated education system. If you could.
No, it's true in France too, because this project is original in France and in Canadian, because we stopped at school, we stopped to play at 6 years old. We are using a lot of board games in the kindergarten classroom before six years old. But after, teachers don't use them. So we want to introduce this practice because we are convinced board games have a lot of advantages. So we want to introduce this practice with teachers, and not only because in elementary schools in France, only specialized teachers are using board games to do re-education or cognitive remediation with some children who have learning difficulties. But it's not so expand in all teachers, in all the classroom in France.
Perhaps I can add a word, because I think your question is very relevant in educational settings of all kinds. When there's evidence, people are interested that it impacts educational outcomes. And so since you mentioned you're from behavioral economics, I know this field somewhat because I'm involved in a master we have about this topic. And so when you talk about behavioral economics, one of the key concepts is obviously money. And so I'd like to mention the idea of funding, because as you saw in the research presented here, which was supported by Asmodee, we have experimental design procedures to test out games and their impact on things, on behaviors. And so, for example, I invite you or others to look up the research chair HOMO CREATIVUS, for example, but it's through funding a foundation or university lab type work that this kind of research could be done more, let's say.
If I can add a word about Asmodee Research, our goal is really to provide more scientific data about board games, but we are not focused on Asmodee and not focused on Asmodee games. We really try to integrate all the publishers around the world. All the things could be interesting. Into the Spark Academy program I lead, for example, we give board games to a university, and they organized an evening of board games to let the students play. And it's really important for us because after the pandemic situation, the students were alone, and it is difficult to create relationship, and board games help to create relationship. But for this initiative, for example, I work with all the French publishers, not only Asmodee. I know the independence is a very important question, but Asmodee Research it's Asmodee because Asmodee is one of the big, and we believe it's our mission to give back something we get. But for us, it's really important to be independent and to be clear. And all our initiatives are not with the aim to sell games at the end. It's not that. It's really to create very independent and very strong data and scientific articles. And that's why we work with these partners, and a lot of them, really to create something really good.
Thank you. Thank you for your work. My question is about remote setting. And in today's world of remote work, do you think playing online creative games or targeting different development fields, it will have the same effects as playing in person for your team or for individually, but especially for the team? Thank you.
Well, that's a very good question, and I'll just start that reply. Maxence perhaps and Celine perhaps have other ideas, but we have done a lot of studies on people in virtual settings who do brainstorming activities and people in real rooms who do them, and compared that, but they were not playing games. They were just doing a brainstorming activity. And in the university student age group, we find that people behave in very similar ways and that the brainstorming sessions go in very similar ways, but people are actually more performant in the virtual setting for various reasons. Notably, it's a little bit of a outside of a normal room experience, which lets them liberate their mind and so forth. It's a little bit gameplay to be in a virtual meeting room. And other things too that might facilitate. And so I think people these days, I'm not talking about exactly my generation, who might be more into physical gaming in a room, but other generations may be totally ready for this kind of virtualized experience of gameplay. And this hopefully would also impact their creativity like it does in the real setting. Maybe others have things to say.
If I can, I just again talk about Leah and the conference of last year. She worked on the differences between the Dixit board game physical version and the application, and she compared the results, so you could find some interesting data. Yes, please.
I would like to ask the measurement again, because the measures are the key to improve the effect of board games into schools. And especially, once again, group performance is very difficult to measure, as someone already mentioned. If you can tell us now, because I understand that it's not published yet, how do you ensure the reliability and validity of the measure of your study?
Validity.
And validity and reliability.
Reliability.
Okay,
validity.
You're talking to a psychometrician, so I could talk about this for hours. Where to begin? Well, it depends on the thing you're trying to measure first. So usually more hard skills are easier to measure because there's like a proper outcome. And depending on, for example, let's say collaboration. Collaboration is the ability to work together, to understand each other, and to produce something that's bigger than the sum of its parts. There's a few, let's say, grid that can help you measure and find some key indicators that the collaboration is of quality. So there's a few things on this, depending, but it's very specific to a particular topic. I'm really interested in the measurement of things, so that's called psychometrics. And usually there's people who dedicate their entire life to just measuring one thing. For example, measuring creativity, there's people who have done this for 30, 40 years only on this. So it's really a broad thing. Usually, if I can say something, maybe find like grid or really, usually there are systematic reviews that really explain or at least list the ways you can measure the things. Like there's systematic reviews about how to measure creativity, for example, the issues with it. So I cannot really say anything more, or at least we don't really have 2 hours to just make an introduction on this. But yeah, you can try looking at this kind of thing, but you need to have in mind that it's really specific to a particular skill. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Just to add something to that, because one of our pastimes in our research lab is to do psychometric research on tests and measures. And so we're familiar with the idea of reliability, meaning we measure things without error, and validity, meaning we measure things that have a real correspondence in the real world. So, for example, in this case, we are using measures that are widely used for creativity in the field of research, used in thousands of studies. And We have things like inter-judge reliability. We had several teachers who judged the originality, and we checked the teachers are aligned, given the same scores, which was the case. So therefore, we think if we ask even more teachers, they'll just give the same scores, for example, okay? In terms of validity, we want that what we measure actually corresponds to what people mean by creativity. And so we do check that our task, in this case, students give ideas, new ideas for how to improve teaching and stuff. The task has natural correspondence to the real world because it is actually ideas we could implement. So it's a real world task. It has what we call content validity, for example.
Wow. I don't know who was first.
Hello, thank you, everybody. My question is for Joy Medakojit. When you showed your results for your research, you seem to indicate that having both a metacognitive learning as well as the gaming was more effective. But the data also showed that the normal group, the control group, was actually below solely metacognitive or gaming. So is there a reason that you framed it that way? Because you kind of said that the metacognitive training and that the games wouldn't have a positive effect, but it seemed like if you compare it to the control group, it did.
I don't know if I understand very well your question, but it was surprising. You are mentioning the regressing score of the control group. Yes, we were surprised about it. We don't know why. We don't know how to explain it. But nevertheless, we have seen some. We have shown the differences between the jeu métagogique group and the two other control groups. Without the control one, the meta groups and the game groups. So it's a good question. We don't have answers about it. It's surprising, I know.
Thank you. I have a brief question for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you had a review of influence of games on learning conducted. And I was wondering, is it published and how can it be accessed if it is published?
Sorry, about what?
You mentioned you had a large review of literature on the influence of games on learning in your short presentation.
Yeah, it's published. It's accessible.
Could you just mention under which name it's published?
Oh yeah, I will just check. Anybody else during this time? Can you? Thank you.
Hi, thank you again for the panel. I had a question if you've done any work with the creation of games in the classroom rather than playing games. Inspired by some mega games at Gen Con and some of the teacher educator things we had done there. We implemented the creation of board games. It's been hard to maintain in the classroom. We started with like playing games to look for mechanics, started getting the kids to synthesize those mechanics, and then look into how we can organize ourselves, co-create rules. But maintaining that within the curriculum has been a challenge without anything to really show as evidence that it's productive other than student scores in my classroom. Are you aware of anything that's going on with showing?
Yeah, this is something I didn't have the time. So there's like a really recent study, so coming from this year by Kuo, so it's K-U-O. I can give you the references, or at least it's in the document. What they did, so they had like a, I think it was in high school, they had like civic education. And during the course of this civic education, say like in the, like the 10th or 11th grade, they had to create games based on two things. First, the topic of the course, and two, the interest, or their interest. So they had the entire semester to do this, and what they found was that they were more creative in terms of verbal creativity. So speaking, finding ideas and explaining them. Graphic or figural creativity, most probably because they created and actively participated in finding ways to express their idea through games. And also, they showed that students had improved in terms of civic competences. So I think there were like 79 students involved. So that's, I think, the first proper study, or not proper, but like solid study that find things that that proves that creating games in the classroom can also be helpful and a solid way to improve both creativity and the actual competencies that are targeted by the lesson.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question about your method as well. How could you exclude in your studies interferences from, let's say, at home? Because when I started playing, when I did Topic Stone Age with my class, and I started playing Paleo with them, they started to playing at home, and they started to playing a lot. So how could you exclude interferences from the groups that played a lot, that they started playing at home or whatever in their friendship groups or so on?
I think this is a question for you because they were there for 30 minutes. They can't go home.
Yeah, but they have a home.
They have a home,
Yeah,
but in our study, they come in, they play, they get tested. They don't go home. So
this is we don't have control this variable about how long they play at home with board games. We don't know it. We don't take in consideration, but it's true. There is it's important to know it. So we try to have a lot of control variables like socio-economical status or IQ, but that one wasn't integrated in our project.
So thanks again for the presentation. I have a couple of questions regarding digital, expanding a little bit on the question that was done before. First of all, if you tried in your research to actually use hybrid games or games that are digital version but played in the same room by people, especially for detaching, all the proxemic material, affective components of gameplay to the actual mechanics of the game. And the second question, thinking especially about the theories of Gordon Kalea Unboxed, the recent book he published about experience in board games, about the substitution of the digital world with board games more recently, because people actually are longing for physical experiences that give them the exact social things that some digital experience do. And I was wondering if you actually tried in your research to measure how much this experience with board games is compensated in a way with a reduction in digital play, especially in the study on metacognition. Because I'm thinking, well, if they are experiencing more board game in real life, probably in that specific age, they will reduce a little bit the use of digital games, and this will change something in the experiments.
So we don't have evaluated the time the children spend about board games or digital games at home, but I know that in this research project there are some psychoeducators who are working with children with learning difficulties, and they should give them like a prescription to play at home with some board games which are training some functions. So I know that they could spend time to play board games at home if they need, but I don't know about digital games. Maybe they will play less to digital games or more to board games, I don't know.
And also about the first question, if you try to actually use, hybrid games or digital in the same room games in both research.
We have not tried that kind of thing. It's a good idea, a good question. It's an emerging topic. Your questions concern an emerging topic, which people are calling the phygital space between physical and digital. The phygital space. I'm not inventing that. So this is an emerging field.
Yeah.
I guess maybe Maxence, when he's done with his PhD soon, he'll be available to work on a lot more stuff.
Yeah, to my knowledge, one study that, so I think I presented it, so on tabletop role-playing, so it was by Chung in 2013, they compared the creativity of 3 types of people who did not engage in any tabletop role-playing whatsoever, versus people who played it a lot. And they had another group which was electronic role-playing, so role-playing through the means of a computer, on Discord or whatever. And the people who played electronic tabletop role-playing or engaged in it were in the middle between the two. So they were more creative than the people who did not play, but they were a bit less creative than the people who engaged with not the real deal, of course, but like with the tabletop version of it. So I don't know of anything else, but yeah, that's one start, I guess.
Hi, so there's questions earlier about adult education using games. And on that point, I think that something that always comes up a question for me, because I use games to teach at undergraduate level and master's level, is it's not just about the value to me as an educator to fit it in, but also the value to them, especially if it's paid education. So I teach tabletop game design to undergraduate students, and to them playing games is very valuable. It's a great use of their time. But when I try and use games to teach master's students in other subjects, they say, why are we spending 40, 50 minutes to learn a game and play a game and talk about the game afterwards versus having a lecture on the subject? So are there any studies you're aware of? And if not, how do we go about doing those to prove that it's not just valuable, which your studies show, but more valuable than the alternative uses of that time?
I'm not aware of any studies about it. Perhaps there is a literature about it, but I think it concerns their mindset. It concerns their expectations, and it's all with students. It's often about, adult learning students at the university. It's often about expectation management and how the activity itself has a different meaning depending on the storytelling around the activity. So if there's after gameplay, there's a good sequence of using the gameplay activity to understand things and analyze it in some detailed way, then they will hopefully at the end see the value of the gameplay activity, which allowed them to generate stuff to analyze. Usually when we try gameplay with our master's student classes, for example, Monopoly in the behavioral economics program, they're delighted to have anything but the regular lecture. Maybe your lectures are too good.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm a history teacher and I am working at this moment at a master thesis about game-based learning and historical thinking. And I was hoping you were aware of studies where they use things like think aloud while playing board games. I'm looking for things like that. Is it used or is it always play a game and then test afterwards? Does it exist? I really hope so.
I'm not aware, but you can send me a mail and I will look it up for sure.
Okay, thank you.
But I'm not aware of it right now.
Yeah, I will send an email.
Okay, we have 3 minutes left, so...
Hi, thank you very much for your presentations, especially those who are not speaking as English as their first language. I very much appreciate the extra effort it takes. This is a bit of a plug, actually. I'm actually just doing a PhD on playing board games with adults and using them to discuss difficult histories, such as colonial legacies and histories in the acquisition of museum objects through the play. So I'd be really, really interested in speaking to anybody like yourself and any other research that's going on. So thank you very much for your presentations.
One question regarding, maybe I missed it in the presentations, but I would be very interested in the, how long does the effect last? Because I know at least in German schools, there's a lot of activities, there's like gaming groups and stuff, but because the study program is laid out like this, and it's probably different than in Quebec, you do this all in the afternoon. There's some teachers that do it in the free time, and then school is out, people go home. Then they come next day, of course, but I guess over time the effect will maybe settle in, but now you test after directly 30 minutes, you do the study, it's done. You do it every day over a week, but how long is the effect lasting?
That's a good question. Yeah, you know, we are talking about near and far transfer in learning, in the improvement of this research. Near transfer is a transfer in the same components, and far transfer is a transfer in over components, less transferable. And after you have got one effect, post-test, immediate post-test or deferred post-test. So we in our research we just use immediate post-test. So, but in our research, we use to defer post-test, and so maybe 6 months later, maybe we can add them because the research just finished in few months ago. So it's a good question, and it's a good alternative too.
Well, I'm sorry, time is over. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your interest. And then invited you to go outside and discover publishers and games around the educational subject. Thank you again. Bravo.